Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is percent. And the percent is the number of parts per 100. So whenever you see a percent sign, you know that whatever we're calculating is over 100. Okay, so you can write it as a fraction, a decimal, or a ratio, a percentage. So let's take, for example, 5%. If I wanted to write 5% as a fraction, it would be 5 over 100 because the percent represents 100 and it's 5 over 100. If I wanted to write it as a ratio, it's 5 to 100. Okay, and if I wanted to write it as a decimal, it would be 0.05 because you would take 5 divided by 100, which ends up being 0.05. So that's how you work between a percentage, between fraction, decimal, and ratio. Now, why is that important? Well, we often see in medications percent strengths. So the percent strengths, we usually see it in like topical medications or IV solutions. So a lot of times they'll just say it's a 1% solution. Well, what does that mean? I mean, if it's a 1% solution, how much of what is in there? So one of the most common ones that we see is hydrocortisone cream. A lot of you guys have probably seen it over the counter. Um, you use it when you have a rash or a contact dermatitis and it itches, and usually it's a 1% cream. So there's a couple things I want you to know. Whenever you see a percentage on a prescription label, I want you to immediately know that that can be converted into a fraction, which can be 2 out of our 3 parts when we're doing a ratio. And that's kind of what's confusing. So let's take here this 1% solution. What is 1% solution? Whenever you see a fraction and if it or a percentage and we're looking at weight over volume, it's going to be grams over milliliters. Always. Every time, if I wanted to make this into a fraction, 1%, I'm making it into 1 gram of drug per 100 milliliters of fluid. Or if it's a weight over weight, it'd be 1 gram of active ingredient over 100 grams of medication. So I'm going to write this out here. 1% hydrocortisone cream has 1 gram of hydrocortisone to 100 grams of cream. That's what it's saying. So that's a weight over weight. We have weight over volume, we have weight over weight, and we have volume over volume. Those are the 3 things that we see when we're dealing with percentages. Sometimes it's really hard. Well, which one is it? Well, it depends on what the medication is. I mean, if it's a topical cream, it's not liquid, so you pretty much know it's a weight over weight, or a semi-solid would be a cream. So that's what you got to keep in mind. If it's a weight over volume, it's going to be, if it's a 1% weight over volume, it's going to be 1 gram over 100 milliliters. If it's a 1% weight over weight, it's going to be 1 gram over 100 grams of cream. And if it's a 1% volume over volume, it's going to be 1 milliliter over 100 milliliters. Okay? So let's break those out a little bit so it's not so confusing. But those are the 3 ways we calculate when we look at a percentage. And you got to be easily move between fraction, decimal, and ratio. We most commonly see fractions and ratios. We don't usually do decimals too often. So let's try and practice this a little bit, okay? Because you might be a little confused right now. So let's start with lidocaine, okay? Here is our medication. We have a 1% lidocaine solution. It's an injection, okay? So it says how many milligrams of lidocaine is in this vial. Oh, you can't see that. Let me get this there. There you go. How many milligrams of lidocaine is in this vial? Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to find our 3 out of 4 parts. Well, the thing that's really nice about this is it gives you that information. It tells you here what it is. So you don't really need to change that percentage at all. But if you did, you would say 1% is 1 gram over 100 milliliters. That is 1%. Okay, I can tell you that. Okay, so if that's the situation, we are working with grams and we need to work in here in milligrams, which can be hard. So we would have to convert, but we do have this information here. So we can say we have 10 milligrams over 1 milliliter and solve for our total volume because we already know how much it is in milligrams without having to convert it, which is kind of nice. So we will go ahead and put it over our total volume and we can solve right here. Cross multiply and divide. 10 times 10 is 100, so it's going to be 100 milligrams. Okay? So if you ever see a percentage that looks like this is how you're going to make it into a ratio with the proper units. Grams over milliliters, okay? So let's look at a few other problems. Let's convert a ratio to a percent. So we have 5 to 1. Let's make this into a fraction, which would be 1 to 5. Then you would multiply it by 100. That's how you're going to convert it into a percentage. So 1 goes into 5, so the answer is 5 times 100, that's 500%. Let's look at this one. It's a 1 to 5 ratio, so it's 1 over 5 times 100. So you're going to do 1 over 5 times 100 equals, well, 1 times 100 is 100 over 5, and 100 divided by 5 equals 20. So that's a 20%. And that's how you calculate percentages. If you ever have to convert from a ratio to a percentage, you're going to go the opposite way. But remember, a percentage is always by 100, so you got to multiply it by 100. Now to convert a percentage into a ratio, change the percent of a fraction and place it over 100. This is a lot easier and I've kind of already shown you this. So 2% is 2 over 100, which we can reduce that down to 1 over 50 if you want. If we express it as a ratio, it's 1 to 50. Remember, if we put this in a percentage, I would tell you right now, never reduce when calculating dosing. Never reduce when calculating dosing. It actually confuses people. So don't do this. Stick with this. If you have a 2% cream, stay with your 2 over 100 if you're calculating it. Now my question to you is, what are the units on this 2 to 100 ratio, or 2 over 100? What are the units? If I am removing a percentage and changing it in am so we have what we call the extremes and the means, the product of the means and the product of the extremes. The extremes, and I'm going to highlight these so it might be a little bit easier to see what I'm doing here. So our extremes are in pink. So these are our extreme numbers, and our mean are in blue. So if you want to determine if 3 to 4 is equivalent to 15 to 20, if they're proportional, if they're truly proportional, what you can do is you can multiply these together and these together. So multiply your means, so 4 times 15, and multiply your extremes, 3 times 20. And that should tell you if they are proportional. So 4 times 15 equals 60, and 3 times 20 equals 60. And if they both equal the same number, then you know you have a proportionate fraction. This one's easy because you could probably look at it and figure it out. But what if you had one that looked like this? Right? Like that's a big solve if this ratio is equivalent. So remember, you want to take your means and multiply them, and you want to multiply your extremes. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to bring my calculator into the screen here. See if you can see that. And we're going to do 240 times 480 equals 240 times 480 equals that number, big number, 100,000 plus. And then we're going to take 8 times 115200. Well, that's a lot bigger than that other number, so are they proportional? No. No, they are not. So these are not proportional. So that would be negative. Okay, and that's how you calculate proportionals using extremes and means. So that's all I have today on percentages. I'm going to have you guys jump over and do a couple practice problems, and then you will get some coverage in lab this week. Have a great day.